Hi everyone, my name is Iben, and last week Frontier finally confirmed that Planet Zoo 2, the sequel to Planet Zoo, is in the works, and I personally couldn't be happier. I think the signs have been on the wall for quite a long time now. I think we've all been speculating that this sequel would be coming. Some people thought it would be coming in a few years, some people thought it was coming relatively soon, but to have it confirmed, it's really a joy. If you know me, then you know that I love talking about this game, and in this series, The Road to Planet Zoo 2, I want to talk about all my expectations, things that I want to see differently, things I want to see be the same for the sequel, but with improvements, things that I hope are going to be changed radically, things that I think won't happen or will happen, all kinds of speculation. And if that is something you like, then I would say subscribe to the channel, because there's gonna be more videos like this in the future. In this video, I want to start with something that might be a little bit contested, and that is that I think that if aquariums will be added to the game, which is one of the things that we are expecting, then I think that those aquariums might end up being some form of advanced exhibits. And I can already feel a few people going like, oh no, I don't like how exhibits are today. And I get that, but I do still think that a form of advanced and improved exhibits can really work for aquariums. To dive into that, we need to dissect what exhibits are, how they function, why we have them, why the animals are for what they are, and let's do that in this video. When we talk about aquariums being like exhibits, we first need to talk about why exhibits are a thing in the first place. Because you could ask the question, why does Planet Zoo have multiple ways to have animals in this game? Why is there a habitat system? Why is there an exhibit system? Now, to understand that, we need to look at Planet Zoo as a zoo game that is limited in what a single zoo can have. Each single zoo can basically be seen as a cup that we can fill with all kinds of things. We can add scenery pieces to build habitats with, we can then add animals and guests on top of that, and then we will probably build some more habitats with more animals and more scenery pieces, and so on and so on, and these animals will start to reproduce, more guests will come in, more things will be built, and our cup slowly starts filling up with more and more things that the cup has to hold. And that's where we get to our biggest issue, because at a certain point in time, when we try to push in even more inside of this cup, we'll notice that trying to squish in something takes a lot more effort for the game. And at a certain point in time, when we go way too far, the game will basically say, yeah, nope, I can't handle this anymore, and it will crash. And that's what both you as a player and Frontier wants to avoid. Now, the biggest issue Frontier has is that the size of the biggest zoo you can make, the size of this cup, is determined by several things, and not all of those things are things that they have under control. And the main two influences are the current technology and the user machines. Now, we as developers are always limited by the current technology we're working with. In 5 years from now, there will be a whole bunch of new technology that many people that are much smarter than us have developed, and we can use to optimize everything from games to websites to programs on your computer. But whilst you're developing something, you are always limited to the current technology. And on top of that, you're also limited because users very often have very different machines. You have people who play on a very high-end PC, you have people who play on a very low-end PC, you have people who play on a very high-end console versus people who play on a very low-end console. And new platforms keep popping up every day. We don't have to look that far. The Steam console is getting released next year, and that's yet another platform with yet another set of specs that Planet Zoo will have to think about if they want to keep the size of the cup the same, or make it bigger, or allow more things to be put into it. So Frontier does not have that much control over how big this cup can get, but what they can do is change the size of the things we put inside the cup. By making things smaller, we can put more stuff into this cup, and it will take a much longer time until we reach the point where the game just basically says, yeah, I've had enough, and I'll crash. And that's what optimization is for, and habitat and exhibit animals are a prime example of the optimization that Frontier has brought to the game. Because if we look at these two types of animals, they are different from each other. Habitat animals have complex behavior trees. They have a big bunch of different animations and a big bunch of different interactions they can do with each other. They have complex needs, complex behavior, all kinds of stuff. On top of that, they have many different animations, and all these animations also have to take into account that they have to navigate the current terrain. The terrain that is defined by the player and not by Frontier ahead of time. And we can see this if we look at the traversable area height map. We can see how much the animals have to take into account, what they have to look out for, what they have to change, how they have to walk, and how they have to interact with an environment you as a builder have created. And this is a very process heavy task for the game. And if every single animal in this game would work the same way, this would be very, very unoptimized, because animals would all take too much from the game and the cup would fill over quite quickly. It would spill over quite quickly. And that's where exhibit animals come in. Because exhibit animals, on the other hand, do not have a complex behavior tree. They have a limited behavior tree. On top of that, they have very few animations, and unlike habitat animals, they do not have to care about the terrain because they're stuck in a fixed position. And we can see that when we look at an exhibit. An exhibit consists of several fixed positions that an animal can spawn on and perform a few animations. And all of that results in an animal that takes much less processing power from the game and allows it to be much smaller, so that the game does not have to do the same amount of work for every single animal. And if we go back to our cup analogy and we replace all animals that are of equal size with their actual size relative to the pressure they put on the system, we see that we can add a lot more animals than we were able to do before. And that's why exhibits are primarily a thing. They allow Frontier to give you more options to put inside your zoo to prevent until you finally hit the limit. Exhibits, therefore, are a very optimized way of representing the animals that are in the exhibit system currently. But maybe it's good to take a look at why exactly these animals are added in exhibit boxes. To understand why specific animals were added to exhibit boxes instead of habitats, we first need to make the distinction between the original exhibit boxes and the more recent walkthrough exhibits. Because, at least from the sources that we have, the walkthrough exhibit was added for a completely different reason. Looking at the developer journal of the Tropical Pack, it seems that at least at one point they considered the sloth to be a potential candidate for the habitat system, but through development they started noticing that the original habitat system was never built with an animal like sloths in mind, so it was moved to the walkthrough exhibit. The same probably was also the case for the bats, the flying foxes and the butterflies, given that those all fly, and that doesn't work with the current habitat system either. So that's one of the major reasons why I'm not going to talk about the walkthrough exhibits in this section. But I am going to go back to these later on in this video because there are some cool advancements in the exhibit system that can be applied to aquariums. Traditional exhibit animals have three things in common, and we'll start by the thing that everyone already knows. They have limited movement both in the game and in real life. That does not mean that these animals don't move at all or that they are incapable from getting from point A to B, but it simply means that when you observe these animals in a zoo, when you watch them, they most of the time stick to the same place. That's where the fixed animations and the fixed fixed spawn points in the exhibits work really well. These are animals that you usually also only see in one spot in real life, so they don't need to have the complex navigation for terrain as habitat animals. Second thing all these exhibit animals have is the fact that their behaviors are very difficult to observe. We can more or less tell what an elephant is doing, what a lion is doing, what a monkey is doing, but if you ask someone, hey, what is this frog doing? Or what is this spider doing? Then most of the time people will just answer, well, it's just sitting there. And that's another reason why exhibits are really well suited for these kind of animals. We don't need to make a very complex behavior tree because people won't be able to tell the difference anyway if we make these behaviors realistically. A third reason why these animals are in an exhibit box is because in many zoos they are in a very generic environment. Now, I'm not trying to say that every single terrarium in every single zoo looks the same, but if I ask someone to create a mental image of a terrarium and then I ask 15 other people to also create an image of that terrarium, they will all have terrariums that look very much the same. If I ask the same about a habitat, they will all have very different mental images. So again, here the exhibit box really seems to shine. The predetermined setup of the exhibit box really matches that of the real life terrariums, and you don't need that much customization. Now, it might seem as if I'm pulling all of this out of thin air, but if we look at the original developer journal of exhibit animals, it seems that Frontier was thinking about that in the very same way. They looked at how these animals interact with their environment and how they are moving and decided to work out the system that they have today. And I think it's also a very important disclaimer here that in this video, the way I structured it, it kind of sounds as if they were first looking for some ways to optimize the game, and then we're looking for animals that fit this optimization. But of course, this was one continuous process. It wasn't first doing this and then that. No, they first looked at all the animals they wanted in the game, and then they tried to think of optimized ways to bring these animals to the game. But now, at this point, we know why exhibits are a thing, and we know why certain animals are part of this exhibit system. So now that we know these things, let's take a look at why aquariums might be suited for these kinds of animal systems. Talking about the properties that define an exhibit animal in Planet Zoo, I think a lot of those properties can also be found in most marine life. Let's take a look at an aquarium. As you can see, we have a bunch of fish swimming around, and one of the first things you'll notice is that there is not much different kind of movement in each fish. The way that it swims is more or less the same. It interacts with the environment that it's in, but it's not like an elephant that walks or runs or uses its snout to fetch water. On top of that, it's again very difficult to see what each individual fish is actually doing. We see them swimming around, we see them swimming in circles mostly, and we can't really tell what they're doing. And those two main properties are very important to me when I think about making a system that would work for these animals if we're looking at something that is very exhibit specific. Again, when you look at manta rays and sharks, we get the same thing. We don't really know what they're doing other than they're swimming from point A to point B, and that really should give us an idea. So again, aquarium animals seem to have a lot of properties in common with exhibit animals. They also have quote-unquote limited movements. Again, that doesn't mean that the animal doesn't move much, but we don't see them doing very much or don't see them do many different things in case of marine animals like fish. We see them swim around, but other than that, we don't see them do anything else. On top of that, it's also very difficult to observe. As I mentioned earlier, I can't really tell what the fish is doing in that video. All I can tell is that it's swimming from point A to point B. And again, we're looking at a very generic environment. Unlike habitats, again, if you ask someone to create a mental image of what an aquarium looks like, they do seem to all be the same. Doesn't mean that aquariums can't be unique, doesn't mean that every aquarium looks exactly the same, but they're much more consistent than, for instance, a habitat exhibit. Now, this drives me to the point where they are again really fitting within the exhibit system. You need only a very few animations to represent these animals in the game in a way that is still realistic to what they're doing in real life. We still need only a limited behavior tree because we don't really disconcern the behaviors in real life, so we shouldn't really be able to do it in Planet Zoo either. And we can again work with fixed positions, and fixed positions here is not the same as the traditional exhibit box. It's much more like the walkthrough exhibits, but it means that the animal swims from point A to point B to point C, and the whole it's swimming in circles kind of thing doesn't need to mean that we have one spawn point where it swims in circles, but mostly that it can swim from one spawn point to the other one and perform different things on every spawn point. I hope you now see what I'm thinking when I'm thinking about having aquarium animals as exhibit animals. Now, I do know that this does not apply to every single marine animal. If we look at animals like dolphins and beluga whales, it seems very clear that they wouldn't work inside of an exhibit system. So probably Frontier might introduce some new ways to use the original habitat system to accommodate these animals, or perhaps, and I'm not sure about that, perhaps Frontier for some reason won't include them. I can see reasons why they would and why they wouldn't. So far we've talked about how marine animals can be introduced into the game with the same optimization as exhibit animals. This is a good thing because if Planet Zoo 2 also introduces things like free-flying birds, then we'll need all the processing power that we got. But there is room for improvement because, as I mentioned at the start of the video, not everyone loves exhibits that much, and that's for a good reason. If we look at today's exhibits, there are 4 major issues. First of all, the size. It was bothering a lot of people. The 4x4x4 box simply does not work. It's not realistic to what it is in real life, and it bothers a lot of people. Second of all, customization is a real big problem. I can understand the philosophy behind it and understand that most terrariums look the same, but this is a creative simulation game and people really do want to have as much customization as possible. So, especially if we want to introduce this specific system to aquariums, we're gonna need a lot more customization. On top of that, there are 2 more things that the traditional exhibit box does not bring that aquariums would need, and that's mixed species and the ability to have much more movement than the original exhibit boxes. And luckily that's where the walkthrough exhibit enters because they have solutions for both. The mixed species system was already introduced with the butterflies in the grassland pack, but this animal, the sloth, introduced some new forms of movement. Looking again at the developer journal of the tropical pack, we can see that they introduced transitional animations between spawn points in an exhibit. So instead of a frog magically moving from point A to point B when you're not looking, the sloth instead can actually move on its own between point A to point B because it has a transitional animation. And this is very important for aquariums. We don't see them just swimming around in circles in one spawn point. We need them to move from point A to point B to point C and back to point A again. And with this technology, this is possible. So in my opinion, there's already a lot there. The basics are already there to really have a optimized solution for aquariums that leaves lots of processing power for habitat animals and free-flying birds. But there are 2 more things that I think need to be adjusted before we can get there. To really get the exhibit system to an aquarium system, I do think 2 things really need to be added. First of all, modular size. I do agree that with exhibit boxes, you can simply solve the issue with giving us 1 or 2 smaller exhibit boxes and then we're good to go. but for aquariums there are simply too many different shapes and sizes for it to work with just a handful of predetermined shapes and sizes. I really hope that they can introduce the snap function that they introduced for Planet Coaster's blueprint system, that also can be used for aquariums, and that we can snap multiple aquarium exhibits together to form one big aquarium. On top of that, I mentioned customization plus. I think the current customization options for the walkthrough exhibit and for the exhibits are simply not enough to get everything we need to get for aquariums. So I hope everything can be turned null and that we can add many things ourselves without being forced to have the same aquarium over and over again. That aside, I think the sequel can use the existing exhibit system, improve it, and turn it into a very optimized system that allows for a lot of processing power to go to the animals that really need it, which in my opinion are habitat animals and flying birds, which I also hope are coming to the sequel. Thank you so much for listening to this short essay. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have your own opinions, your own thoughts, if you completely disagree with me, leave a comment in the comment box. Tell me why you think I'm completely wrong, and I hope you found this video interesting. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe, and if you want to see more on my channel, I want to direct you to my current series of the Zoo of Ghent, where we are building a fantastic zoo in the city of Ghent. See you next time.